Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brothers and sisters, Jazakumullah khair for joining us. This is Gems from the Noble Quran al-Kareem. And joining us today, our host and presenter will be Sheikh Hammad Rahman Faheem, inshallah ta'ala, from the European Islamic Center. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Allah ta'ala wa barakatuhu. Jazakumullah khair for having me here, and it's a great opportunity to once again be here to share some gems mainly from Surah Al-Muzammil today.
Jazakallah khair. We're ready to start whenever you are, inshallah ta'ala.
Sure. Can I just confirm that you can see me?
Yes, so far so good. Alhamdulillah, we can hear you and see you. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا. الله ربي لا أشرك به شيئا. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من أن نشرك بك شيئا نعلم ونعوذ بك بما لا نعلم. نعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. ثم أما بعد. Respected brothers and sisters, it gives me a great opportunity to once again be here to really share with you some of the gems from this very noble surah, Surah Al-Muzammil, which is one of the earlier Makki revelation. And if you remember, we discussed last week that revelation has two phases. And there was the earlier phase of revelation whereby the Prophet ﷺ, during his struggle in in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ, he received, of course, revelation and which were pertinent to the circumstances and to the context of Mecca. And so it was intimate. The nature of the revelation, the content of the revelation was, let's say, slightly different in terms of what was addressed compared to the revelation which came to during his latter phase in Medina. And some of the characteristics of the earlier revelation is that there was a lot of issues regarding revisiting the tenets of our faith, revisiting the core beliefs as Muslims. These were primarily the discussions that prevailed in the sort of in the phase of the Mecca phase. So these were the Mecca phase was all about reinforcing our belief system, and many of the prescriptions and many of was in relation to consolidating the belief of Muslims who are, of course, a minority within the community of Mecca. Of course, when we move on to the Madani phase, we find that there are many prescriptions relating to legislation and relating to other legalistic matters. And so in the Makki phase, as we said, we find that this surah is one of the earliest surahs that was revealed. Now, I will start by reciting the Arabic, and then I will give the English equivalent. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا إنا سنلقي عليك قولا ثقيلا إن ناشئة الليل هي أشد وطئا وأقوم قيلا صدق الله العظيم. Here in this surah, what we find is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the start of the surah begins with a call to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, O you who wraps himself up in clothing. And the word al-muzammil is used. And al-muzammil, according to the linguists, is namely the idea of you being wrapped up with a blanket or a cloth, which you typically would do before retiring or when you're resting at night. And this is a very normal human behavior. So there's a specific call to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being addressed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, giving him a description of the state of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he is wrapped up and he is warm and comfortable in his bed. And here comes a voice, and here comes a revelation giving a description of the immediate circumstance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Ya ayyuhal muzammil, O you who wraps himself up in clothing. And now on the face of this, you might think, okay, well, why is the Quran, or why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala address him in this way? And if you were to dig further, you realize that this is ultimately related to the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a very compassionate way, in a very intimate way, and that is ala sabil al-mulatafa, as the ulama they say that it's not a very formal tone. It's almost like an informal, it's a touching tone, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of the worlds, the King of the kings, the most supreme, is calling upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this tone and in this manner, that you who wraps himself up in clothing. It's a very soft and a very heartfelt way of addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have addressed him in the many other ways that he addresses the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as Bashir and Nadir, the one who gives glad tidings, the warner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have addressed him with the many other names of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he addresses him in this very intimate way. And this shows ultimately on one hand, it shows the compassion of our Creator towards His creation, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, He's addressing each one of us who wraps himself up at night and is comfortable in his bed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also saying to you, O who wraps himself up, you, قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, rise to the night except for a little. There are other equivalents like this in our tradition. What I mean by equivalence is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also addressed his cousin Ali radiallahu anhu, based on the state that he was in. And let me give you an example. We know that there's a narration that Ali radiallahu anhu was sleeping in Medina, the masjid. And what had happened was that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went and he wanted to visit Ali, his son-in-law, his cousin, and he knocked on the door, the door of Fatima radiallahu anha, and she said that, oh, we had a bit of a tiff, we had a bit of an argument, and so he's gone. I don't know where he's gone. I don't know where he's gone. And it turned out that Ali radiallahu anhu had gone to the masjid, okay, and and the Prophet ﷺ found him sleeping, and he had dust on his head. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he woke him up and he said, "Wake up, O Abu Turab, or the father of soil," meaning that was the condition that Ali radiallahu anhu was in. So it was a very intimate way of waking him up, you know, and so referring to the state of the individual in whatever state he's in. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to the Prophet ﷺ in the state that he's in, Ya ayyuhal muzammil, O you who wraps himself up. This also shows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of our movement, every single movement, and the condition that we're in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is well aware of our state, our condition. He knows what we wear. He knows our physical state. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is well aware. But the main thrust of these verses is about maintaining a balance between being active in the public domain and developing yourself in the private domain. And so what happens is that the Prophet ﷺ, he has been given this huge monumental task of spreading Islam. And we know that the task of spreading Islam came over many phases. You had initially the covert call to Islam, what was known as the Da'wah Sirriya, where the Prophet ﷺ was instructed to only invite to Islam only his certain family and friends and those who were inclined towards the deen and the truth. And then later on, the Prophet ﷺ was asked to propagate that to a wider group of people, and then ultimately it became then a public propagation and a public call. Now, since the Prophet ﷺ is now instructed to go out and call people to Islam, he is naturally going to get popular. He's going to become popular. Now, of course, when popularity comes into the equation, then there's ego that comes into the equation. When there's ego and popularity, there's sort of there's the unsatiable or insatiable desire of of fame and arrogance. All of this comes as part of parcel of being in the public domain. Now, right from the outset, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inculcating in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the fact that, look, your public success is inextricably linked and tied with your private success with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we know this? Because we find in the previous revelation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْمُدَّثِّرْ قُمْ فَأَنذِرْ. Stand and warn. And so here the Prophet ﷺ has been given the burden of propagation. But in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him the technique, or he's given him the instruction of standing by himself at night when nobody's watching him apart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ensuring that his records are right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before the people. And so this is an important premise. This is an important principle, that as people who effectively would want to see the success of our faith in the public space, and we want to see, of course, that our religion is being taken seriously outside, and is our religious values is something that is seen and admired by people at large, and we might advocate for that, and we may engage in many public platforms, that ultimately none of that is going to be of any success unless you have your private success with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is important, especially for those of us who are quite active out there in the public sort of sphere. And hence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is proposing this balance right from the start, and saying this to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that even after a hard day of advocating for your faith and propagating the message of Islam, that do you think that your job is done? Do you think that your task is done? No, that's just the beginning. Your task is only completed when you now stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you seek His help, when you cry to Him and you supplicate to Him and you invoke Him, and you remember that every movement and every success is ultimately God given. Sorry about that. So here what we find is a call towards spiritual development, self-development, that if you want to really think about public success, you must then have your own private success in your own space. And quite interestingly, there are scholars who have written about this, including the likes of Imam Ibn al-Jawzi in his famous book known as Sayd al-Khatir, which is a book in which he collects sort of random fleeting thoughts, and he compiles them, and in it he writes the importance of atharul khalwa ala al-jalwa, the impact of your private affairs and your private condition, and the way it reflects in your public affairs and the way it reflects in your public sort of success. I mean, these days what you have is you have politicians and leaders of the community who show on face to the outside world, but their personal lives is in shambles. I don't want to name any particular politicians or leaders, but it's very common that you find that sort of when the cameras are off and when when everyone goes home, and when if you were to sort of learn about the private life and value, and the sort of the private affairs of certain leaders, you sort of question that how can such people be leading our communities? How can such people be seen as leaders of who are drafting policies and who are in positions of governance, and yet they have in their personal space there's no integrity and there's no morality, and this is the sort of dilemma that we face in today's era. Whereas if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, his entire life was transparent. That Aisha radiallahu anha, his own wife, tells us everything about the Prophet ﷺ, and we learn that there's consistency between his public success and also his private success. So, Ya ayyuhal muzammil qum al-layla illa qalila. O you who wraps himself in clothing, arise to pray the night except for a little. There's an Arab poet who talks about the importance of the night prayer, and he says, قم في الدجى أيها المتعبد حتى متى فوق الأسرة ترقد. That stand at night, O servant of God. Until when are you going to continue sleeping? Until when are you going to continue in your slumber? حتى متى فوق الأسرة ترقد. قم وادع مولاك الذي خلق الدجى. Stand in the night and call upon the one who created the night in the first place. Allah tells us that one of the purposes of the night is, yes, there's a biological purpose. Allah says, وَجَعَلْنَا نَوْمَكُمْ سُبَاتًا, and that is ultimately to give you peace. Allah says, لِتَسْكُنُوا فِيهِ, that the night has been created so that you may find tranquility in the night. Yes. And also that the night is also, it has this sense of privacy. Allah says, that there's a veil. Okay, I mean, people enjoy the privacy of the night. Okay, in the daytime everything's transparent. Okay, those are some of the functions of the night. But Allah also reminds us, and He says that وَهُوَ الَّذِي تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا والذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر وأراد شكورا. That one of the purposes of the night is that we engage in the night with remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the night has this effect on us. There's the absence of daylight, and we, on one hand, we remember that that if Allah wants, He could freeze the night completely, and there will be no day. Allah reminds us in Surah Al-Qasas. He says, قُلْ أَرَأَيْتُمْ إِنْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمُ اللَّيْلَ سَرْمَدًا إِلَى يَوْمِ القِّيَامَةِ. That have you seen that if Allah wanted to freeze the night time right until the Yawm al-Qiyamah, who other than Allah will bring out the day, in which, so that you can go about your lives. So why do you not see? So the night has certain functions. One of them, of course, is to find tranquility in it and to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it, and also to remember the blessing of the day as well, and also to sort of allow the night to to be a moment of reflection and deep ponderance as people go to sleep, and as the rapid movements of the day and the hustle and bustle of the day come to an end. It's an opportune moment for you and I to reflect on our true condition. And so the Prophet ﷺ is being reminded, قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, that stand at the night time except for a little. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he would typically, he would pray typically 11 rak'ahs at night, according to many ahadith, including a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, where the Prophet ﷺ says that صلاة الليل مثنى مثنى فإذا أراد أحدكم أن ينصرف فليوتر ركعة واحدة أو كما قال. The Prophet ﷺ says that the night prayer consists of 2 units, that you pray in 2 units, 2 and then 2 and then 2 and then 2, and whenever you want to complete it, then just finish with 1 rak'ah, 1 independent rak'ah, which is known as the witr. Of course, we know that that can be joined with the 2 rak'ahs, which resembles the Maghrib prayer, which is typically how it's done in the Asian communities, which is the witr prayer, the 3 rak'ahs, or it can be done as a single prayer after praying the 2 rak'ahs. And so, يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو ينقص منه قليلا. Half of it, or subtract from it a little. Many of the scholars state that the Prophet ﷺ, qiyam upon him ﷺ, was initially an obligation. It was initially given as an obligatory instruction to the Prophet ﷺ specifically. And perhaps that is because of at the advent of Islam, there were a lot of hurdles, and there were a lot of hindrances, and there was a lot of opposition. And it's quite possible Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed him and gave him the nighttime prayer as an obligation, so that he can have the capacity of tolerating what's going to come during the day. And this actually, then reminds us that everybody is going through troubles. Everybody is going through issues in life. And if we can make the nighttime opportunity to really engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if we can make the nighttime as an escape, and if we can really build a strong, formidable connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll be ready and fit to challenge anything that happens during the day, because we realize that our Creator is watching over us. We've communicated our sorrows, and we've told him about our hopes at the night when everyone has been sleeping, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws near to the lowest sky when everybody is asleep, and he listens to the munajat and the invocation of the servant who calls upon him. And so there's a reminder there for all of us to really take the opportunity to really benefit from the night time. يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو ينقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا, or add to it and recite the Quran with measured recitation. رتل القرآن ترتيلا, again, is an instruction given to the Prophet ﷺ that ultimately the substance of your ibadah is the Quran. The salah, of course, consists of standing, prostrating, bowing, and there are other additional adhkar and tasbihat that you do, Subhana Rabbil Azim, Subhana Rabbil A'la, and then you do the tahiyyat, lillahi, which is the dua of greeting whilst we're in the sitting down position. However, the substance of our ibadah, the focus of it is the Quran al-Kareem. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to the Prophet ﷺ that, look, cut off all your worries. Forget about all of your worries and all of your sorrows. Read the Quran with measured recitation. Notice the word measured recitation. The idea is that when we recite the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing else should be impacting our engagement with the book of Allah. No other extraneous thoughts, no other influences, to the degree where our recitation is consistent, is balanced, is proper. Unfortunately, the reality is that recitation these days is somewhat of an inconvenience for us. I know that as an imam, when it comes to Ramadan, people want to leave. And I remember when I first led the Taraweeh, I was young, and I led the prayer, and I must have read it slightly slow, or with a measured recitation, according to how I recited it to my teacher, who recited to his teacher, who recited to his teacher, all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. And so I recited the Quran. A group of people came to me later and said, Jazakumullah khair, your recitation is very nice. Please, can you speed up next time? So I said, okay, I'll speed up. And then I must have read slightly faster pace. And then the next day, some people came to me and said, brother, your recitation is very nice. Jazakallah khair. Please, can you slow down? So you can never satisfy people as an imam. It's very difficult. As they say, that trying to satisfy everyone is an impossible objective, impossible sort of goal, which can never ever happen. But the point being is that when it comes to recitation, we especially when we engage with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we just gloss over it and recite it superficially. And in Ramadan, we find these video clips that are sent around on WhatsApp of people who recite the Quran at super lightning speeds, and unfortunately, what it does is that it takes away the spirit of the Book of Allah, because these are the words of Allah, and they need to be given proper attention. The words of Allah need to be recited properly in terms of the actual speed, as well as giving every harf, every letter, its proper weight, because the phonetics actually have an impact on your listening in profound ways, even if you don't know Arabic. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding the Prophet ﷺ, regardless of what's going on in your life, when it comes to engaging with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you recite it with a proper measure. There are certain things as human beings which we would do. Regardless of our circumstances, we would ensure that the formalities, the conventions of that particular duty or engagement or task is maintained, regardless of what's going on in our lives, whatever that is. Whether it's the formalities of attending a court hearing, whether it's the formalities of being composed at an event of some sort. Okay, we tend not to show other interests at that moment. Why is it with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we forget that? So the Prophet ﷺ is being told and he's being instructed, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. When it comes to recitation of the Quran al-Kareem, give it proper measure, recite it properly, regardless of whatever is going on. And this is what we learn from this surah, that number one, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of our condition, and he spoke compassionately to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he is also by extension speaking to us compassionately and telling us that, look, stand up at night and pray to the one who created you, and that ultimately if you want success in your public success, then it starts off with private success. That's number two. Number three, as we said, is make the night a point of refuge for you and me. Make it an escape. and stand when everybody else is asleep and cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fix your affairs during the day, inshallah. And number 4, we said that our engagement with the Quran should be so formidable, and it should be so unwavering that our recitation isn't affected by any other influences, any other thoughts, and any other waswasa, so that we can maintain composure in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can give complete, full attention to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we engage with it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from you and I. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the Quran as a means of our success in the dunya and the akhirah. And I'm happy to take any questions, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Of course, these are half-an-hour sessions, and it's sometimes difficult to try and grasp the full essence of the surah and to sort of capture the full flavor of what's going on. But I hope I was able to convey some meaning and some of the guidances from the surah. Jazakumullah khairan. I leave it to you, Dr. Yes. Jazakallah khair.
That's fine.
Sorry, if there's anybody asking the question, I can't. Can I just ask one of the organizers to make their question audible? Jazakallah khair.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. I think we come to the end of the session, Sheikh Faheem. I don't see any questions. MashaAllah, I believe your presentation was very thorough, as always. Can I take this opportunity for thanking you for your efforts? MashaAllah, 2 weeks consecutively is quite demanding. And alhamdulillah, I for one, and I'm sure others who have listened tonight and who are listening through the recordings, many others who will listen through the recordings have benefited from this.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great opportunity. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables for us to live these verses and that it manifests in our habits and in our lifestyles, inshallah. Thank you for having me, inshallah, and I'm here for any further engagements, inshallah, as long as I'm given ample notice and I'm ready to engage.
Jazakallah khair, inshallah. So that's the end of session. We will actually move on to session number 4 next week. For now, once again, Sheikh Faheem, many thanks, and to the brothers and sisters who have been listening. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this humble effort, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us closer to the Quran and to the lessons within the Quran, so that they are instilled in our daily lives.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.